Greetings, everyone. This is Phil Amerson again with the To Be and Do podcast, where we talk about the importance of interdependence and not just individualism and independence. And today I have the great honor of speaking with my friend De'Amon Harges. And De'Amon, our friend Mike Mather and I used to talk about the genuine article, and you, my friend, are the genuine article. For those who don't know your work, DeAmon is, well, the original roving listener. And he brings real life and beauty to the whole notion of being a social banker and collecting up the gifts, skills, and talents of people around. So I hear you're in Alberta today, De'Amon. What you doing there?
Well, I'm talking, having a conversation around what does it mean to be interconnected, and it's at the Aging Alberta Summit. So I'm talking to folks why it is important for young people and old people, Black people, white people, to live in an ecosystem together because they're humans. So
Wow.
yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, well, we could talk a lot about your background, and I'd like to hear about the learning tree. But first of all, what's it mean to be a social banker?
Well, part of I think for me, I mean, it's something that's been emerging in me when I started the idea of being a roving listener. I remember Mike Mather when he met. I can see his brains like dialing in, and I came up with the term because after the work had started, finding people's gifts and talents, I started my own little thing, and I had a lot of success. And I was thinking, like, people in my neighborhood don't get to always have the success. A lot of people way smarter than I am. What and who was it that made this happen? And what practices that followed that? And it was at a party one time. Me and my neighbors were throwing some parties, and my neighbors would say, "Dude, you know the head of the Indianapolis Foundation. You know the head of the Central Indiana Community Foundation. You know the uh, you know you know so many people that have uh, have some influence." And they said, "Why don't you bring them to the party?" I didn't get it. And later on, I realized that my neighbors knew the value of social connections and social capital. So I started thinking about series of things like that. That I was like, why would people want to come to something that I would do? And I would see other people like Mike is a social banker. He would just invite people, and people would trust. So I started thinking about, oh, this social banker is not only a connector, they wield intangible currencies like relationships, trust, imagination, right? And gifts and networks. So I realized that that became my role in the community. But alongside that, the social banker don't work alone. I realized that was just an archetype, and there were several different archetypes. Mike Mather is doing something in Boulder right now uh, with people without housing, and he's called them illuminators. That is an archetype. They hold things up. So I realized there were series of archetypes and that pushed me along my way, and I used my gift and community to figure out how to make those connections.
So one of the challenges is having people understand the resources that are around them, not just the those that have resources and want to say no, 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 you can't join our club because you don't have resources, but also people who don't have resources. sometimes feel like they're blind to the gifts sometimes that they possess.
I remember reading a quote from the great late Dr. Paul Farmer, and one of his speeches, he said, "We have been schooled in scarcity." And when we say that, it is that our whole fabric is around what we don't have or what's not possible or what's wrong. Those things can be true, but I think what the framework that I'm thinking about in the archetypes are people who look to cultivate an abundant community or a beloved community. And so, in that, there are practices that we, I think, that we're striving to reintroduce to community, like the fact that the biggest resource you got is your neighbor. And the way to find out what that resource and what God has put into that human being is to ask their birth story,
You know,
right? What is the
that's getting awfully
meaning? What
yeah,
created their meaning?
yeah. That's getting awfully close to the Christian gospel. I'm a little worried about you. You're not a preacher, are you?
No, not at all. I mean, but I think when people think about Christianity in itself, it is far from what the fabric started. It was all about people seeing the abundance around the gospel itself. But even the Old Testament, you had to escape scarcity. You in scarcity for 40 years. And people that think scarcity couldn't go to the promised land, right? And it was that anyway. But along those journeys and in those stories are currencies and nuggets of abundance. And I remember me and Mike Mather was having breakfast with Peter Block and and Walter was talking about the Exodus. He said, pain is an instrument of imagination. And it just
Wow.
struck me, right? That through all of this, I feel like that's what Jesus really did with, you know, with the lame and, and, and the blind. And we ain't talking about the people without limbs.
Yeah, yeah.
We're talking about folks who had power,
The
and that
snowflakes.
that was those were the ones. Yes, yeah. Anyway, but I think that's why it started. I've been thinking in the frame of a beloved community, and I think we're all looking
So
to figure out what that means for us.
so tell us, there's so many things, but tell us about what you're doing, in the neighborhood, on the west side of Indianapolis right now.
Yeah. So we're developing a corridor, uh, which means a live workspace. We're looking at totally affordable resident-led development, which means this first phase of the work right now, we are into our first 24 units, which would include an art gallery on the bottom, uh, a grocery store, uh, and a the world's first social credit union. And
Wow.
and it'll be housed with social community social bankers. So that's
Yeah.
the first phase of that. But we also have a bar and lounge. We hope to totally have 101 units when it's said and done. Now, let me just say that this sounds really good, but you really understand scarcity in terms of it when you start getting brick and mortar. Not
Right.
only the thing you that rang true, what you said was really about not only do institutions have scarcity, but now we realize how much more work we got to do, social banking we have to do to cultivate the currency of trust. Because even the power dynamics of have and have nots go through there. And we have been tricked to think that somebody else is better than somebody else. It's the whole game that we got. So a lot. So what does that look like for us? How do we throw more parties? Right,
Good. Yeah.
celebrations and naming the gifts of the humans in our place. So that's the big thing. So the other thing you also realize that in our so we used about 8 years ago, Riverside Northwest was had the largest vacancy rate in the city of Indianapolis.
Wow.
It was 40% of all the city's vacancy rates.
Oh my goodness.
So you understood there's not a lot of money there. It also meant that the way people viewed us, we also viewed ourselves like that.
Yeah.
And when we started, me, a few of my neighbors, Wildstyle, Pichelle, January York, at the time it was Amanda Wolf, and a few other folks, we would commit to going through our neighborhood doing what we did at Broadway. And we were amazed at like what we were finding. I think we also needed therapy, right?
Right.
Because how could we believe that nothing was there? And so that kind of led up to this way. One of the currencies we utilized is my neighbor, whilst though the storyteller, that's his archetype. But when he started taking photographs and finding, telling stories about people in our neighborhood, not only did we see ourselves different, we started to really control our narrative. That currency started to lead up to people coming to our parties. That's when Ryan Payne, who me and Mike had for 10 years, have been having deep conversations with about extreme capitalism versus
Yep.
relational currency.
Yep.
And it took Brian that long to come to this space. And he started to bring his friends. That's really those two antidotes we brought together at a series of parties. That's how we actually bought that property. It was about $2.1 million of property overall.
Okay.
And you wanna hear this? The loan is at 1% over uh 15 years. And the land was bought on the auspices that we didn't need to come up with a plan because the act of reparation means that they trust that you'll discover it. Right.
So
So
yeah,
that's
I
a so I wanted
go
to say
ahead.
that's the most important part.
So you've taught me the importance of art, the importance of story and narrative, and the importance of party. Those are all things that help build social capital. I mean, we
Yes,
didn't we
it
didn't go into
is.
your background, but you're an artist. You've taught,
Yes.
you've brought it to the neighborhood. I think of the Doors project.
That project, that is a cool that I get to talk about that today as a way that we utilize to engage people. Two things was true is that uh, we were deprived of people listening to us. We were rich in those stories. And what we did is we knew that people wanted to share. And this was a way they saw themselves bigger. That no, they knew my neighbors knew they were than um, bigger than who they were. They were part of something bigger. They wanted the world to know that their gifts were needed and their stories are needed. That was kind of the. It was easy.
They're often the most important stories, the hidden stories that make everything else move.
Yeah. And here's what's abundant is those stories. But here's the act of scarcity. We think they just appear.
Yeah.
We have to
Yeah.
go get off our couch and go look for them.
Right.
That whole
Well, they're
notion,
nowhere
if
on the
we build
bank.
it, they come.
Right. But stories, I don't think I've ever seen any bank mortgage form say, "Tell me your story."
No, no.
It
And
might
you know, Phil,
say, "Tell me your problems. Tell me your scarcity. Tell me how much you don't have."
I got a story about the follow up. You remember Jeff Bennett as deputy mayor?
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to tell you an act of scarcity for me is that I've been knowing Jeff a long time, since the time of Broadway, and he was part of the development, and I had despised him. Like, and he would say probably for some good reasons. He's a good guy. Let me just say that and preface that. Um, and I wouldn't talk to him. And my neighbor, whilst I was like, talked about, man, you the social banker. You the person that need to be taking walks with him. Nothing's going to change. And anyway, I would just turn my back on him, and uh, every time we were talking, he would just give me a compliment. He's a really gracious person when I think about it. Um, I started taking walks because whilst I had became friends, and he was deputy mayor at the time. This was right when we started to work with Indianapolis Foundation around uh, the community ambassadors. And we were in charge of thinking about how services, Shauna was a big part of this too, how services were um, released, and how do you not make people feel like scum because they're poor. And so partly we realized what you said about those questions, and man, we gave a really hard time. And I remember Shauna sitting back. Shauna was no holds bar, but he was there and he listened to the truth. He went back and we worked on a few iterations, and Shauna, myself, and the rest of the ambassadors came up with 3 question statements on the form. And what brings you joy was one of those.
What brings you joy?
The other is what are your gifts and talents, and
Gifts
what
and
is your
talents.
support
Yeah.
system? I think you're familiar with some of those.
Yeah.
So we, he went back and he says, uh, all right, we could do this. And we took these and used them through the eviction courts. But he gave us money to do mutual aid. And here's the example of what I said, Jeff, why'd you do this? Why did you trust us to give this money? And he says, because government don't have the currency of imagination. It's like what I
Oh,
notice is that you all are figured out ways. And so you get what I mean? And so
oh yeah.
that right there is like, it isn't that the idea was good. It was that relationship was nurtured enough to build the courage and the trust to listen to folks you would never normally listen to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're gonna stop here. As you can tell, those of you that are listening or watching, when you start talking with DeAmon, you get deep. And the currency of imagination is just a thought for us to finish on today. But I want to go back and say part of what DeAmon has referenced several times is Broadway Church in Indianapolis, and is Shauna Murphy, who's now the executive director of the Martin Luther King Jr. Center, and is Wild Style Pascal, who is a great storyteller, photographer, artist in his own right, and a lot of people in power, either in community foundations or in the city, who, well, let's just be blunt, who hadn't ever known about the currency of imagination. And so we're going to stop there, and we're going to pick up in the next episode with I ought to make him the Reverend Doctor, but I'll just call him the great artist, roving listener, De'Amon Harges. Thank you, De'Amon. This is Phil Amerson with the
Hey,
Belonging
thank you, Phil.
Exchange.